If you were told that there was a pill you could take that could cure you of some dread disease by which you were embattled, would you take it? Is there such a pill for the alcoholic? Have I been wrong in my long-held opinion that there is no such thing as a magic pill that, as some claim, can bring about such a cure for the alcoholic? Welcome to episode 6 of Two Drunks with a Mic, the podcast where we share our past so that others might have a future. Subscribe and share is all we ask. In episode 5, The Promises, during my conversation with Gary Farrell, we shared the opinion that there is no magical cure to be found in a pill. I've held this opinion for a long time. But like I said in our Origins episode, we are not above learning new things, especially if it can help to save someone's life. So I revisited my opinion, and like I've said before, we will always strive to remain as objective as humanly possible. What I've put together is by no means an exhaustive study. A simple Google search and a dictionary can get a person to where they need to be to find all the information I've found. All sources are cited in the show notes, and I would urge anyone interested to check them out. So just so I'm clear, it isn't the efficacy of pharmacological treatments such as the one I'm going to discuss that I call into question. Like I've said on many occasions, there isn't a one-size-fits-all form of recovery. Randy and I, we really don't care where you find that solution, as long as you find one. As to whether or not such a protocol is a good one, there are plenty of people out there to man the fields of that battle. Most debates I have read regarding the validity of one treatment system over another amount to no more than mere spirited opinion being thrown back and forth, and a whole lot of "this didn't work for me" coming from both sides. And honestly, it gets rather tiresome. Some have even gone as far as to cast blame on the institution of AA, claiming that the organization is blocking the path for what AA detractors feel are better ways. Though there are articles out there that call into question some of the methods used by others, I have yet to read any article written by an AA proponent that categorically denies the effectiveness of these other forms of treatment. I'm sure they exist. I've just not seen them. But you know what? I've got no horse in either race. So all I would say is whatever you do, make up your own mind. So this question of whether or not a magic pill exists stems from the myriad claims that an opiate antagonist, such as one known as naltrexone, can be and has been successfully used to treat and, here's our word, cure people stricken with, to use the modern term, alcohol use disorder, or AUD. Though there are others that heavily market themselves as purveyors of such a drug, perhaps the most well-known system to employ the use of these particular pharmaceuticals is the Sinclair Method, or TSM, as most of its adherents I've found refer to it. As TSM's name might suggest, this method was researched and developed by the late Dr. John David Sinclair. So what is TSM, and what is its working design? In his definitive statement published on the C3 Foundation's website, Dr. Sinclair explains the Sinclair Method as such. His words: "The Sinclair Method, TSM, uses the nervous system's own mechanisms called extinction for gradually removing the interest in alcohol and the behaviors involved in alcohol drinking. Therefore, the technical term for TSM is pharmacological extinction. The key scientific discovery underlying the treatment was that, contrary to earlier beliefs, detoxification and alcohol deprivation do not stop alcohol craving, but in fact increase subsequent alcohol drinking. The old idea that alcoholism is caused by physiological dependence on alcohol, therefore, needed to be discarded, and a new understanding of alcoholism developed. Subsequent research showed that alcohol drinking is a learned behavior. Some individuals, partly for genetic reasons, get so much reinforcement each time they drink and have so many opportunities to drink and get reinforcement that the behavior becomes too strong. They cannot always control their drinking. They cannot just say no. And society calls them alcoholics. Laboratory studies indicated that in most cases, the reinforcement from alcohol involved the opioid system, i.e., the same system where morphine, heroin, and endorphin produce their effects. The brain has two primary mechanisms for changing its own wiring on the basis of experience. First, there is learning for strengthening behaviors that provide reinforcement. Second, there is extinction for removing behaviors that no longer produce reinforcement. The best-known example involves Pavlov's dogs that learned to salivate to the sound of a bell when the bell was followed by food, but then had the learned behavior extinguished when the food reinforcement was no longer given after the bell was rung. Certain medications such as naltrexone, naloxone, and nalmefene block the effects of endorphin and other opiates. I reasoned that if alcohol is drunk, well, one of these opioid antagonists is blocking the endorphin reinforcement in the brain, the extinction mechanism would be activated, and it would then produce a small but permanent decrement in alcohol drinking and craving. The next day, the person would be slightly less interested in alcohol. Eventually, control would be regained and the person would no longer be an alcoholic. Indeed, they no longer would be interested in alcohol. The Sinclair Method was confirmed first in a large body of laboratory studies, then in over 90 clinical trials around the world, and most recently in personal reports by people using. It has been found to be successful in about 80% of alcoholics. This is very high for alcoholism treatment, but the treatment is not for everyone. Some people apparently have a different form of alcoholism that does not involve the opioid system and cannot be treated effectively with opioid antagonists. The Sinclair Method is simply taking an opioid antagonist before drinking. Naltrexone, naloxone, and nalmefene are not substitution drugs similar to methadone for heroin addiction or Nicorettes for nicotine addiction. The opioid antagonists are not addictive, and they do not directly reduce craving for alcohol. And unlike disulfiram, or Antabuse as it's perhaps better known, the opioid antagonists do not produce an unpleasant adversive effect. Indeed, the opioid antagonists do not do anything until after endorphin has been released. Then the mechanism of extinction is triggered, and the extinction mechanism in turn progressively but permanently removes the neural cause for excessive drinking. So to hear Dr. Sinclair explain it, TSM is, to use his words, simply taking a pill before drinking. However, in additional articles such as the one I found on Oxford Academic, Dr. Sinclair does state that all of the successful clinical trials have been conducted with naltrexone in conjunction with comprehensive programs of psychological therapy for treating alcoholism. It is also in this same article that Sinclair even suggests that a program such as AA may be a valid choice as a support. Though I do have a couple of concerns regarding the treatment methodology, namely this whole need to drink part, my argument was never whether or not TSM or the like are valid treatment options. My statement has always been that there is no cure. Oh, but wait a minute, you might say. Sinclair didn't say anything in his statement that even suggested it being a cure. So I'm going to admit this. I did get a bit lazy in my search for whether or not TSM actually claims to be a cure, and ended it when I found Dr. Roy Escarpa's book on Amazon titled, cleverly enough, The Cure for Alcoholism. Dr. Escarpa is affiliated with C3 Foundation and is an avid proponent of TSM. So cure is his word. It's not mine. Alavida is also one that claims to cure. And interestingly enough, both are no abstinence required programs. They seem to kind of tend to use similar models. As a side note, we'll get to the concerns surrounding the no abstinence piece in a bit. For the moment, I have two main concerns that need to be addressed before I would be willing to admit that these are indeed a cure. So as a reminder, Merriam-Webster defines cure as a complete or permanent solution or remedy. Following are my two main points of contention. Number one, it doesn't work for all alcoholics. As Dr. Sinclair states, there are types of drinkers that don't hit the markers needed to allow TSM to be effective. It is my suspicion that these are actually the discarded physiologically dependent. But at any rate, this isn't a deal breaker for me from a treatment perspective. As far as I know, there is no such system in existence that will work for everyone. AA and fellowships of the like, they don't work for everyone either. But they also don't claim a cure. In my layman's eyes, if it can't be treated, it can't be cured. Number two, the language progressively but permanently removes the neural cause for excessive drinking is suspect. This unravels, at least in my estimation, with Pavlov's dogs. And being an old rancher, I just can't help myself but to try to bring a little common sense into the equation. So I guess my question is this. Could that same group of dogs be provoked into salivating at the sound of the bell and then have that reaction extinguished cycle after cycle after cycle? If the answer is no, then true extinction has been achieved. However, if the answer is yes, extinction, by definition, is not achieved. As a lifelong dog owner, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that the answer to this question is yes. The cycle can be repeated. So for context, let me put my thinking this way. The bell is drinking. The effects of drinking, whatever they may be, are the food. The bell rings, we drink, we're rewarded. It's simple enough. The bell rings again, but this time there is no food. Or in our case, there's this opioid antagonist, our pill. It's added to the mix, and the rewards are diminished to the point that after some period of time, a person is going to lose interest in alcohol, perhaps altogether. But take the pill away. And then what? Bell, reward? Bell, reward. If a once problem drinker drinks, the alcoholic mind is going to rebuild every set of rewards that had ever been. And coming with them, the four horsemen. From one that has been down that road, I'll tell you that alcohol comes back with a vengeance, and it is not going to let you go nearly as easily as it did the first time around. If it lets you go at all. If Pavlov's dogs unravel, so does the claimed cure. Valid treatment option for some? Yeah, maybe so. Cure? Well, I'm not seeing it. But hey, you know what? At the end of the day, I'm just one guy with an opinion. And despite my misgivings, there are many out there that claim great success through TSM and some of these other programs. Listen, I, or even Randy for that matter, could make the same claim that our recovery treatment cured us. After all, we no longer have the craving for alcohol. Our neural cause for excessive drinking has been removed. We are some of Pavlov's dogs that no longer salivate at the sound of this proverbial bell. And no pills were used in our treatment. So why don't we? Why don't we scream it from the rooftops that we have a cure for our addictions? We don't because it would be a lie. We know better. We carry with us a healthy respect for the substances that were instrumental in destroying our lives. Perhaps somebody may ask a fairly valid question. Does our not proclaiming such a victory amount to us living in fear? Dr. Stanton Peele, in an article titled, "One of the most popular podcasts in America totally botched its drug addiction episode by peddling miracle pills," puts his version of a beatdown on the hit podcast Radiolab for what he estimates to be their mishandling of a report that a miracle pill had been found when they were speaking of naltrexone. But that's not why I'm citing his article. I found something else. While I don't agree with everything that Dr. Peel wrote in the article, specifically his assessment of the 12-step model in this excerpt, I did find one statement particularly interesting and in some ways rather challenging. He says this: by reinforcing the myth that addiction is uncontrollable and permanent, neuroscientific models make it harder to overcome the problem, just as the 12-step disease model has all along. Telling yourself that you are powerless over addiction is self-defeating. It limits your capacity to change and grow. So I'll ask it again. Are we living in fear by not proclaiming a once and for all victory over our addiction? Specifically, a fear of powerlessness over addiction? Contrary to Dr. Peel's take on things, the answer to that is no. It's no because we have never feared addiction, and we were never taught to fear addiction, as Peel states in his articles that some programs teach. We were, however, taught to have a healthy, rational dose of respect for the substance. It is out of this well-deserved respect that we would never mislead someone by claiming a cure. So that's where I stand. No miracle pill, no cure. An effective habit breaker? Yeah, I'll give it that. But so is time. Is it a valid treatment option for some? I would be irresponsible if I said no. Though the numbers that TSM claim, the 80% are vigorously contested. As a matter of fact, in that same article, Dr. Peel addresses this as well. I'm simply not prepared to say that TSM and others don't have a valid place in the treatment community. But I do want to touch on one thing I mentioned earlier. This is speaking directly to the treatment protocol TSM says makes it so effective, and it's this. You have to drink for this system to work. Specifically, a person needs to take the prescribed drug 1 hour before they drink. I'm not even sure how to deal with this one. I mean, I get the theoretical reasoning behind it, the whole Pavlov's dog similarity, the pharmacological extinction and all, but I don't know. Maybe we'll do an episode one of these days on the physical destruction that alcohol has on the human body. But strictly speaking for myself and the type of addict that I was, and to some extent still remain, between a pill and a bottle, that bottle will win every time. And on top of that, I'd lie to your face and tell you that I was taking the pills just like I was told. And you just have to trust me. In an article I found on aabeyondbelief.org, the writer voiced their own concern when addressing the taking of naltrexone, specifically under the Sinclair Method, and this benefit of taking naltrexone with drinking. Their observation. There are factors that work against this. First of all, drinking is dangerous for an alcoholic. 10% of those who took the medication showed no positive response at all, and another 10% were not able to follow directions sufficiently to have any benefit from it. Of the 80% that would eventually show significant results, the initial phase of the program still possesses significant risks. In the very early phase, the medication does not yet have much effect, and the drinking behavior is as risky or even more risky than it would be without the medication. Even once the medication starts having an effect, but while a person's drinking is still rather on the heavy side, it is only the pleasurable effects of alcohol that are lessened. The impairment of motor skills, reaction time, social interaction, and judgment remain as strong as without the medication. So there is still significant risk of problematic outcomes during the first few weeks of treatment. It is small comfort that anyone was on his way to sobriety if he manages to cut those hopes short with a fatal car crash or some other event during those first couple of weeks. My point in bringing this up is that there are some legitimate concerns that need to be taken into account while considering if this type of treatment's right for you. If one's ultimate goal is to become a normal drinker and control alcohol, defying all conventional wisdom as the proponents of TSM claim is possible, a person would have to consistently and faithfully take a pill as prescribed for the rest of their life. And if those are your goals, hey, more power to you. But I'll say this, you aren't the brand drinker I was. So one last thought. If you're out there struggling, I'm going to tell you this. You can get out and you can stay out. We know this because it's our experience. There is no requirement to admit powerlessness over addiction and live a life of self-defeating manner as Dr. Peel suggests is being taught. You do, however, have to at some point admit powerlessness against the substance. See, the difference being, you can move courageously against your addiction, but you never want to become complacent in your respect for the one thing that has proven itself greater than you, that is destroying your life. Booze, dope, pills, it doesn't matter. The starting point is the same. And remember this. If that one more powerful thing that can destroy you is out there, there is something more powerful out there that can save you. As I wrap up, if you or someone you know has experience with TSM or one of its similar counterparts, and you disagree with me, email us. We'll give you a platform to voice your opinion. After all, it's our hope that at the end of the day, we are all on the same side and genuinely want to do what we can to end the affliction. Thanks for listening. God bless.